What? Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no! And it ain't over now, because when the going gets tough, the tough get going. Who's with me? Let's go. Come on. Hey! Welcome to the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast, episode 5. This is Justin. Hey there, Joey.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, it's going. So we briefly talked before the show, and you're not sure where that quote came from, right?
No, I mean,
It's from a college comedy.
a college comedy. Was it one that you and I watched in college together, per se, many years ago?
We might have. This is like an old school classic, like from probably the 70s.
Is it Animal House?
The one.
Yeah, we most definitely watched that together.
Okay. Yeah, I think I had that on DVD at the time. I think I discovered it in high school. But yeah, I remember some fraternity brothers of ours were like, "Hey, I'm this one and I'm that one," and so we had some good times with that.
Most definitely. That was not to be my original guess though.
Oh, really? What would that be?
It was gonna be like Good Morning Vietnam.
Okay, no, not quite. Although, whenever I was coming up with this idea to do a movie quote to start the show, that was one of the first things that came to mind. But actually, at work, I have this little like desktop calendar with movie quotes for each day of the week, and that was one that popped up, and I was like, I think that would be a fun way to start the show. I kind of butchered it, but yeah, we'll see what we can do in post about that. All right, so welcome to the show, everyone. This is the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast, a show all about guys just chatting about a bunch of movies and having a good time doing it. A warning, there are spoilers for all films we discuss here. So if we mention a film you have not seen before, do the old school trick and get those earmuffs on and fast forward a bit. And hopefully we'll be past that part and on to another movie. And it's all about, getting everybody's watch list all filled up with new ideas and also talk about movies and what we think about them and all that jazz. All right. Our featured movie this episode is Persona from Swedish director Ingmar Bergman. Joey, what led this classic film to be put on your movie club list?
Well, I had heard you and I had heard you and my roommate both talk very highly of this movie. So, based on that, both of you guys, have very good opinions of movies, and so based pretty much on that, just those two opinions, and reading, I think, a couple of reviews, maybe at the time when we started to do this, I decided to go put it on the list because I'd wanted to see it. I mean, had heard just a bunch of stuff about it.
Awesome. So this is the first pick that I'd actually seen before, but I felt it was about time. It needed to be revisited. All right, here's a synopsis of the film from Wikipedia. Persona is a 1966 Swedish psychological drama starring Bibi Andersson and Liv Ullmann. The story revolves around a young nurse named Alma and her patient, well-known stage actress Elisabeth Velger, who has suddenly stopped speaking. They move to a cottage where Alma cares for Elizabeth, confides in her, and begins having trouble distinguishing herself from her patient. All right. So our show has been on an interesting path. We started off with Ashes and Diamonds, kind of a film that was underseen. And ever since we've been, I think, kind of doing more and more popular films as we came along. And now we've landed at Persona, one of like the pinnacles of art house cinema. And so, a movie that many, many, many people have reviewed online and analyzed to death, picked apart. So, kind of brings up an interesting question of, what will the average Joes bring to the mix? And we shall find out. I'm not really sure I know the answer yet, but we'll see how the conversation takes us. Just to dive into some of my history with Bergman real fast. So I studied abroad in college in Sweden, and I heard a lot about Bergman. And I actually hadn't seen any of his films yet. I actually did. I remember doing a project in one of my classes over there and saying, "Oh, Bergman's great," and he did these films, and everyone loves Bergman, but I hadn't seen anything. When I actually got home, I rented on Netflix the movie version of Fanny and Alexander, and I watched that and enjoyed it relatively well. It was kind of a slower art house cinema kind of deal, and it was different, but I enjoyed it. Then later on, just like about a year or two ago, I became more interested in the 1001 movies you should see before you die list, and that's when I saw Seventh Seal and enjoyed that as well. And then eventually I got around to Persona, and so that was not long after that, and that's the point where it really kind of rocked my world. Um, I started writing analysis more frequently the summer of 2017, and Persona was the film that I saw, and I was just so like moved by to where I knew it was 5 stars right away, and I had to write about it like immediately. And it was one of my more popular reviews at the time, and I got quite a bit of attention, so that was cool. A nice breakthrough for me. Um, so some of the key reasons why that occurred for me um, is most definitely that scene towards the end where each of the women, well, let's break it down. Okay, so there's this monologue that goes on about how one of the women rejected wanting to be a mother, and how, you know, basically the one woman is telling her like how like awful she was because she wanted to reject this child that she had, and at the same time like on her face you can see like how regretful she is. And then Bergman shows that from the opposite view, and so you see like one woman being told this, and then it starts all over and you see the one woman telling her this, and then eventually their faces merge together. And it's kind of a strange place to start this whole conversation since this is such a complicated show. But that was the part that was like, okay, I get it. This is incredible. And it really got me. What were some of your first impressions of this one?
So I didn't really know anything about the movie at all going into it. I intentionally did not reread your review before the movie because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions. The only thing that I remembered was either on one of the cast or us talking off cast about it was that you had said it reminded you in part of Fight Club. So that I
Right.
want to say it was very, very beginning. The opening sequence or shortly thereafter was a splice reel, and there was a penis, I believe, also to go with that, which is very, very Fight Club. Um, and it was like the first thing I was like, oh, okay, I see Fight Club like immediately. In that sense, and then the rest of the movie, the main thing most people think of when they think of Fight Club, because Fight Club has been turned into like this bro movie where everyone's like, oh, Fight Club and fighting and underground fight clubs, style thing, to go with the name. They don't look at the duality aspect of it, or the toxic masculinity aspect of it and that kind of stuff to go along with just the guys fighting and such. Um, so I wrote in my review that while in Fight Club, they end up giving it to you. They give it to you that Brad Pitt and Ed Norton, or that Tyler and oh Lord,
Don't worry, he's not actually named.
Oh,
He,
okay.
he's just referred to as the narrator. I rewatched that last year, I think, and I went to write my review, and I was looking for his name. And I'm like, oh, he doesn't have a name. He's just the narrator. So that's kind of an interesting twist.
Okay, well, yeah. So, yeah, that gives you that that they're the same. The one's a splinter personality or a dual persona, if you will, of each
Yep.
other. And in this movie, is like I was left scratching my head at the end. It's like, is that like I really saw the Fight Club, like where Fight Club went. I was it is it Fincher? He's like,
Yep.
I was like, I like this movie.
Yeah.
That was like my big takeaway. And it's been a couple weeks since I watched this movie, and it's still like that's the I it's like it's like an onion. It is like an
Hmm.
onion, dude. Like there's so many layers, and I just like I feel like I could watch this movie three or four more times, and every time
Hmm.
I'd probably be like, I don't even know.
Yeah, I hear that. And Fight Club, bring that up. That gave me a similar experience back when I was in middle school when I first saw that, and the twist dawned on me. Um, So some of my other experience, one thing I wanted to note about Igmar was the fact that so after I watched this, some of the other movies I watched were Cries and Whispers, Wild Strawberries, The Virgin Spring, and the thing with Igmar Bergman is it's very deceptive because you look at the runtimes of his films and they're generally like an hour and a half, but whenever you dive into one of these films, it's not an easy breezy hour and a half movie. There's like so much there's so much depth to it. It kind of knocks you in the face with some bricks. You're like, whoa, that was way more than what I anticipated with like for instance, Cries and Whispers. I saw a dub version of that hour and a half. I was like, oh, just kind of watch this before bed, and it was a lot to take in. So I would recommend that one as well. So watching this about a year and a half later, it was kind of a whole new experience for me. I had really forgotten how experimental and slow and challenging it was. But at the same time, although it is kind of challenging, he brings you in numerous ways, especially in the beginning. He like tees it up with all this really abstract imagery to kind of puts you on the edge of your seat and like, okay, this is going to be weird. So get ready for it. Here's a little craziness to start off with, and we'll dive in from there. Um, what were some of your impressions of kind of the crazy flash elements that really kind of teed all the surreal stuff up?
The main thing that I really remember of the movie, because like I said, it's been a couple of weeks ago now. Um, is I remember like you said the scene with where they merge the faces together. Um, I remember the scene pretty vividly where they got into a fight and she threatens to throw the boiling water on her. Um, and at the time it's like, okay,
Right.
that's pretty like a crazy thing to threaten somebody with. And then when you think about it even more as the movie progressed and you look back on it, it's like as the conflicting dual persona within trope that's within the movie. It's like that's really really crazy. And then the other thing that stood out is when Elizabeth's husband, I think it was Elizabeth's husband shows up, and
Yeah.
she's talking to him, and he wants to he wants to make love to her, and this that, and she does, but she doesn't seem very happy about it. And it's like that whole scene, and you just think about it where it's like, oh, she doesn't really want to, and then it's like, wait a second, that's that really the other one's husband. It's just like all like who's really who and what's really going on. And it's just those like, man, that was, like I said, you just the things you think about, it's just
And you're absolutely right when you mention that it's like an onion, because like when thinking about how to like talk about this, I was so stuck in like some of the like technical aspects of it in terms of like the cinematography and less in I mean, there's a lot of plot there, but at the same time, a lot of times my mind wasn't being drawn to that. It wasn't until I rewatched some of these sequences just a little while ago to where I was brought in by how much friction is created at the end whenever these dueling personalities are kind of going at each other. Like the nurse, she's like this such a sweet person at first, and then like you said, she threatens her by you know threatens her with the boiling water because she's getting so fed up with her like being the silent person who she's just gabbing to, and she also gets so angry with her because she exposes her secrets in this letter, and then she gets back at her with that scene I had mentioned earlier, where how she was so accusatory of her failing as this mother. An interesting aspect I wasn't going to get to later, but I want to hit now is you'll notice there's two scenes in there that kind of take a step back. It's whenever Liv is looking at the Vietnam footage of somebody burning to death. You recall that?
Yeah, yeah, I remember that.
That, and I think she looks at a picture of the Holocaust. And what I kind of gathered from those moments were, yes, Bergman is telling a very personal story of identity and self, but at the same time, he wants to take a step back at times and say, there's a big, awful world out there too that matters, and we're going to acknowledge that, and now we're back in our little persona story. So I thought that was a good way of showing that he's not totally self-absorbed in this little pretentious thing, art piece. He is paying tribute to some of the horrors of the world at the same time.
That's a nice little insert there.
In terms of the cinematography, oh geez, where do you even start? So Svein Nykvist was his cinematographer, and I did some little research on the film. And Bergman actually wanted to call this film cinematography at first, but the studio was like, "No, no, you're not coming out with a movie called cinematography." But you can really see like what's there, how they could have gone with a title like that. Um, I mean, just to kick it off, like it starts with this projector firing up, and so right from the get go, he's like, okay, you're watching a movie. And he reinforces this like halfway through whenever the film breaks or whatever, and he's like, "You're watching a movie," and then at the very end, when this persona has combined and they essentially become one and the same, and she's being filmed as she's leaving the island. Once again, you're watching a movie. So he really enforces that, and it's been duplicated several times in various films. With like Monty Python and the Holy Grail, how that ends up becoming kind of meta at the end with them breaking up the shoot to arrest them. And there's a couple other examples, but I won't spoil those movies for people that hadn't seen them, so I won't even bring them up. Um, you got anything?
No, but that actually adds, like, I mean, I've seen Monty Python like a gazillion times. I mean, I feel like most people have at this point, as old as it is, but that does add an extra little chuckle there, knowing that I always just kind of thought they were just being silly, but
And then, have you ever seen The Last Temptation of Christ by Scorsese?
I have not. That's on that's on a list somewhere, one of the many lists I have.
He does a similar thing. It's not quite the same thing. Like at the end of his movie, when there's the whole like Christ is ascended kind of thing, the film breaks almost as in like this was such a powerful moment. He like bursts out. So I kind of feel like Scorsese kind of took it as well. Um, Taking it back to influence, we had already mentioned Fincher with Fight Club, definitely there. I know Mulholland Drive is on your list, so we'll be getting that to that around the corner. So David Lynch definitely tried to tackle this story of women becoming one, more than one women, kind of becoming a joint identity. and Mulholland Drive, and then you'll also see it in another Criterion movie called Three Women by Robert Altman. All these directors kind of tackled it in interesting ways, and they're all really, really solid films. So I would recommend all three of those as great feminist cinema, art house stuff. Um, Going back to the cinematography, Persona is like a total masterclass in black and white photography. Like I was like getting ready for to talk about this, I just kind of flipped through the whole movie and just the sheer amount. Like first of all, like so it's black and white, and so you think contrast. You have your blacks and your whites, and with this movie, the abundance of these like flooded white backgrounds with solid black objects on top of them, it just dominates the whole movie, and it's just so amazing to watch. So despite how slow the movie is, you're just captivated by like just this face, like they're just talking about whatever, but it's totally blacked out, and it's like, why is it blacked out? I mean, what's that making me think? Is this person taking on a different identity? That kind of stuff. So, and the use of shadows, it's just it's just a masterclass. That's the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that going on, like you said in the movie. And it's like if someone's wanting to shoot in black and white, there's you just watch that movie for sure.
That reminds me of when I watched Kurosawa's. I would say he is probably Bergman's equal in terms of shooting black and white. And the principal example for me is Rashomon. There's this scene where they're in the woods and it's all black and white, and you see this peering light coming through the trees. Because typically, whenever you think black and white, you think it's going to feel very flat. But man, these master directors and photographers really brought some life into this black and white photography to where it almost, you can't even tell it's black and white because it's so dynamic and radiant without there even being color. So it's pretty incredible that they're able to do that with such a simple palette.
Oh yeah, like I mean, it's just yeah, Kurosawa especially. I've seen more of his movies than I've seen Bergman's, and he just that man knew what just knew what to do with the camera, and there's just it's ridiculous what the things he could do with the camera. It's not even fair.
Some interesting things to note. So in the opener, I had mentioned that he really tees up for you, like that this is going to be an abstract work. Um, if you, the more you become, I actually haven't seen all Bergman's films, but in hearing some different reviews and perspectives on this. Um, a lot of the imagery in the opening does come from some of his other work. Like there's a spider at one point, which is from, I think, Through a Glass Darkly is where the spider is. And then there's a slaughtered lamb, which I think gets into some of the more religious works. And I think there's a film called The Passion of Anna that delves into that some. So I haven't actually seen all these films, but I know there's a lot of connections with his previous work, which kind of which goes back to showing how much of a technical showcase this was, to where he was kind of like doing his like best in show of some of the imagery he had already done in this very highly technical work. Um, okay, so one of the huge elements, I wouldn't really call it a theme, is so did you notice all the hands?
Yeah, I seem to remember the hands. That I seem to recall that.
So yeah, hands is, and you wouldn't really, like, I remember the first time I watched it, that didn't stand out to me, but then I listened to some reviews and they were talking about the hands, and you watch it back and you see, like, in the beginning there's some child hands, and then there's a couple times where you see the hand getting nailed to the cross, and then with the two women, they're constantly like holding hands and touching, and I really feel like the hands aspect of it is that touching, coming together, um, idea, which goes back to these personas coming together. Also, in the beginning, there you'll see this young boy, like, so he's in a morgue laying down, and you're like, oh, he's dead. But then he sits up all of a sudden, puts on his glasses, and then wanders over to this blurry screen and puts his hand up there. And that's kind of foreshadowing what we'll see later with the faces merging together already. And it's also foreshadowing the fact that, she's going to feel all this guilt. Both women are going to feel all this guilt about wanting to reject this idea of motherhood. And then this boy kind of embodies this idea of this lost child.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So tell me your thoughts about the orgy monologue.
Oh, I was very surprised. Honestly, I was not expecting that, and like I don't remember specifics. I just remember thinking that it was like pretty detailed, especially for a movie from that time period. And that was one of the things that just really shocked me was just how like I don't want to say necessarily graphic, but just kind of graphic that it was like in its detail of what was going on. Um, for especially because that was what like 1966 or so, like, and it
Yeah.
was just like wow, that's that's a lot of detail for to be in a movie. I mean, that's it was just kind of like I was not expecting something of that nature.
Yeah, I know what you mean, and it's an interesting because typically the rule in visual media is show don't tell, but these it's amazing how Bergman makes this monologue so captivating. It's almost kind of turns you on with how detailed and how passionate it comes off. It becomes quite sensual, and like, I mean, personally, like seeing all these close-ups of Liv Ullman's face and like pouty lips, as like I kind of fell for her in this movie. She's, it's pretty traumatic at times, but there's some sensual moments too, where like her, like she's kind of quivering, and it's pretty sensual as well. So, kind of had the hots for Liv in this
I
one.
mean, yeah, I understand. I mean, that's completely understandable. And back to what you're saying about the when most people say in visual media where you show don't tell, but sometimes when you tell something, our imaginations, what you can dream up sometimes is way better than what you can see in some instances. And so you get a good enough story, it's like what you could dream up with, maybe the person you want to be with is better than what's on the screen, and that can you can go places with that. And um so yeah, or maybe you want it to be with the person that's on the screen, and you can dream it up your own way, and leaving the old saying, leaving something for the imagination.
No, you're absolutely right, and that's a fantastic point. I think that's a lot. That's why a lot of people enjoy reading some stories over watching them, because they can come up with their what's going on in their own minds. And yeah, I think you're 100% right with us with hearing this stuff where it's so long and extended that it's bringing those images into our mind, and at the same aspect it's complemented by how fantastic the acting is, where you really see the divulsion of emotion going on within these women's face, as like especially in that last monologue, when she it's so accusatory about how she failed as a mother, with how much in pain she is, in terms of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did this. I abandoned my child. And it's all in her face, and it's pretty incredible. I guess we can go back and forth a little bit on hopefully you have an idea of some of your favorite shots. I guess the one I'll start off with is it's this really, really ethereal shot of like they're in their nightgowns, and there's like the soft backlighting and like these curtains, and one of the women like slowly comes through this doorway, and one's on the bed, and it's so ghostly, and it's just an incredible moment. And that transitions right into the first time, where it's this head on shot, and it's the two women kind of like embracing each other, and Liv's like rubbing her hand through the other woman's hair. And you kind of have this essence of like some like sexuality between the two. It's very sensual. I mean, again, it's a masterclass in cinematography.
I mean, it really is. I wish I would. I really wanted to get a chance to watch another, like watch it again. Having it's, it just didn't happen, unfortunately.
No problem. And then next time you pop it in, you gotta look for these things and maybe have an even a whole new interpretation. Like, yeah, I mean, I read my review from a year and a half ago, and there's a lot of stuff like I saw this time. I'm like, oh, that was new from I didn't see that the first time, and then I reread the review. I'm like, oh, I did see that, and I did write about that. So, oh, it's amazing. How your perspective can change over time, and what your memory does.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Another, I might have mentioned this before, but I was just really stunned with, especially that final monologue with how the face is split in half with the shadow. So it really shows kind of a light side of the face and a dark side of the face. And to me, that was really symbolizing like the light side is more the more humanistic element of the woman, where she, has this regret, but then the dark side of the face is more representative of like her professional life, because within the monologue they talk about how like she didn't want a child because she wanted to keep being this actress and keep up her reputation. um, so you have that, and then whenever it flips, it actually flips the shadows, so the other woman, like, it's a light side and dark side, and then they come together as a whole, as one persona. So it's the more I talk about it, the more I like it. And actually, on my rewatch, I was kind of sleepy, and so I was kind of like, um, some of the parts were dragging a little bit for me, but some of these key moments, took me right back in, even though I was a little sleepy. And the more I think about it, the more I like it.
Oh no, it was definitely a fantastic movie. I definitely enjoyed it a lot. It like you said, there's parts, because there, a lot. It's a movie where a lot doesn't happen for periods of time, other than a lot of very vivid imagery.
Can you talk to some of the? There's actually, I mean, like we talked a lot about the sensuality and the dramatic moments. There's some pretty eerie moments as well. Do those crop to your mind?
Um, I mean, we talked about it a little bit earlier. Like I felt like the scene with the boiling water, like that. I guess it's not really eerie,
Yeah.
but it was like is this about to happen, like kind of thing. And that was
Hmm.
that was kind of strange. Um, and then I seem to remember a scene where like hell, it might have been the scene right after that where one of them's like on the beach and the other one's chasing, like because they're at the beach house when the scene with the water happens, and I guess she runs out or something, and she's like chasing her, trying to get her to come back or something. Um, but I guess that really isn't eerie either. To be fair, um,
Whenever you watch it again, really kind of look for the or listen for the musical tones. Like a good example is when their faces do merge, it gets really eerie with the sound there. And when you do look at their face, it looks almost unnatural that it's come together.
oh well, yeah, for
Um, so that's an instance. And then whenever like the film breaks, there's like this flash of a devil, so he makes it a little eerie there. So
yeah, I'd forgotten that there was the thing with the devil. You say that, and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that, and going, no, what the hell is this? Like, it's just like, that was very, it was kind of strange. It was
yeah.
like kind of like, what's he trying to tell me here?
Yeah, very subliminal. I mean, like you said, there's so many drawn out, beautiful shots that, the those stranger moments don't really crop up to your mind. And the last thing I wanted to say is when the film starts and the film reel gets going, you hear these screeching string instruments kind of go, and that distinctly reminded me of the opening of Paul Thomas Anderson's "There Will Be Blood." It has the same kind of opening with really setting up this eerie presence, this eerie setting with the use of strings. Have you seen that flick yet?
I have seen that movie. I saw it several years ago now, and I do seem to recall that at the beginning. That was definitely that movie was a little bit out there, if I recall correctly. Um,
I think it's a masterpiece. It's a flawed masterpiece because I think the beginning of the third act is extremely drawn out. Um, but maybe we'll get to that one on another show. But I think we've talked ourselves into a pretty good place with Persona. My final rating, I think it's a masterpiece. 5 stars. Every time I watch it, I'm sure I'm gonna come up with whole new ideas of what to think and talk about. But getting ready for this review and talking it over with you and getting your perspective on some couple things was neat. And hopefully, the more you watch it, the more you'll appreciate it. So, 5 stars from me.
oh, that's really fair. I gave it 4.5. I haven't actually given anything 5 stars this year. That was a new movie that I've watched. This was probably the closest thing. This is by far, I think, the best movie that I've watched of any variety this year. Whether it's for the cast or just that I watched for fun. The only reason I don't think I gave it a 5 is that, like we said, in some parts it was slow, but also like this is a movie that you have to watch multiple times, and I felt like that in rewatches at 4.5, it gave me some wiggle room to either move it up to that 5 slot or move it down to a 4, which I don't see happening. But just some wiggle room to go up in future watches.
Very cool. That's Persona. Highly recommend it. And if you've already seen it, you should watch it again.
I concur.
So, moving into our next portion is our film discussion. And with In Game taking the world by storm, sweeping the box office, breaking every record in sight, why not talk about Marvel? Why not talk about how, after 11 years of buildup, Marvel delivered the ultimate accumulative epic masterpiece. I mean, it's a flawed masterpiece. I've said that once before on this show tonight. But yeah, we're going to talk about our top 5 favorite Marvel films and talk about our first impressions of Endgame, spoiler filled. If you haven't seen Endgame yet, I mean, what are you doing with your life? Anyways, all right, Joey, what's your number 5 Marvel film?
Well, it is the very aforementioned Endgame. Actually, it snapped
Oh.
a place into my heart and into the top 5.
For me, it'd be the original Iron Man. I saw this again last year, and what a solid entry to start everything off. It's just such a fun origin story. Um, Jeff Bridges, Robert Downey Jr. Um, just it's so cool to be with Downey Jr. in this suit. The technology is just so cool. Um, it's the it's kind of funny that this is in my top 5. I mean, it's a fantastic movie. It's You have the political themes there with this kind of being kind of towards the end of the Iraq War. I think in terms of time, timeline wise, it kind of deals with the whole military industrial complex. So you have that going for it, and then one of my biggest pet peeves in Marvel films is when the bad guy is dressed exactly the same as the good guy and they're going at each other and they're exactly the same. So this one is guilty of that. It's just a bigger version of Iron Man he fights at the end. Um, but overall, uh, just a fantastic way to start things off. It got a little rocky after that. All right, what's your number 4?
Number 4 is Black Panther. Um,
Wow.
Yeah. Oh no. I very much enjoyed this movie. I think in a previous cast we talked about how much I enjoyed this movie, where I actually liked it a lot more than Infinity War, and you were very surprised by that as well. So
I
just
think I thought you had said you liked Thor Ragnarok the most of those 3.
I did say that. Remember?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I did say that. So But I very much like Black Panther. I like a lot of the fighting scenes. I like Chadwick Boseman a lot. Michael Jordan doing his best to be Michael Jordan. That was just, I just really really enjoyed it. And I thought it was fantastic overall. To be quite honest.
Black Panther is in the middle of the pack for me. I rewatched that recently. It's a really, really solid entry. Michael B. Jordan, pretty solid villain. Quite the specimen to look at too.
Yeah, dude, he was
Goodness.
ripped up for sure.
Especially that with him having that that scarred look, it really definitely brought a whole nother level to his shirtless appearance. I'm sure the ladies love that. Yeah, Black Panther, kind of middle of the pack for me, but definitely. And I mean, I gave it 4 stars right after I saw it in the theater opening week, and that really spoke to a lot of black folks. Seeing you know another black superhero lead a movie with an all black cast, not an all black cast, but a predominantly black cast. So that was a special moment for black superhero movie fans. So got to give it props for that. My my number 4 is the original Avengers. So growing up in the 90s and getting these superhero movies where, you'd have your origin story, and then it was kind of like the Superman formula. Like you had this big origin story, then the next one comes along and they don't want to be a superhero anymore, so they have to deal with that, and then so on and so on. And it really never felt like these superhero movies went anywhere because they kind of like were telling the same story over and over and over again. And finally, Marvel comes along, and after a couple movies, this mythical idea of bringing this interconnected universe together. It was the first time they had ever done that, and they did it masterfully. The Avengers, I remember going to see that in the movie theater, and it was just an absolute blast. Seeing that, hearing that theme song by Silvestri, I think, is the composer, and seeing the camera whirl around all the Avengers, and they actually got Hulk right in that movie. Hulk was if Hulk has a movie in the MCU, number one Avengers, number two probably Thor Ragnarok is where Hulk definitely shines the most, more so than his own movies, unfortunately. Uh,
Yeah, I loved Avengers, and if we had expanded this list out, both of your 4 and 5 would have been in my top 10. Like you can't, especially with how Endgame ended, and we'll definitely talk about that going forward. Like you can't not include Iron Man. At least I can't. So yeah, I approve of both of these picks so far.
all right, so where'd you head in number 3?
The very, very aforementioned Thor Ragnarok at number 3. Um, the Asgardian of the Galaxy. Oh my God. His last of 3 appearances in the universe, starting with Thor Ragnarok into Infinity War, into his turn into Rob Zombie slash the dude in Endgame. Like, oh my God. He has been fantastic, and just the whole thing in Thor Ragnarok was fantastic. Like I left the movie theater, and I literally just wanted to turn back around and rewatch that movie. It was like fantastic. I'm really mad that I missed the steelbook on that, and I just haven't brought myself to spend the $70 for it on Amazon. Although it is
Yep,
a 4K, and now I can watch 4K, but it's neither here nor there.
I picked one up.
I I mean I want to, but I got some other things going on first, I guess. But it's
Yeah, that is a damn nice steelbook with the red. I don't know what's on. I don't know what that is, but the red and him, and yeah, it's looks pretty
and
sharp.
I still remember, hey, that's my friend from work, and then they just like it's just, oh man, I oh man, I want to stop this right now and just watch it. Like I can't even just.
It's a fun movie, and the more I watch it, the more I enjoy it. Yeah, like I told you, that one got a little messed up for me because I watched the trailers so much. But yeah, there's some definitely some special elements of Thor Ragnarok, and I put it as my number nine. So yeah, I could probably move that to eight easily over Guardians.
I think it's interesting. Like the more we talk, like I think we have outside of maybe Black Panther, we seem to have. If we did a top 10, we'd have almost all the same movies, just in very different order.
My number three is Avengers Infinity War. Um, what a great for bringing even more characters together compared to what they did, previously in the Avengers and then in Age of Ultron. Bringing in a whole nother, like, I remember my Letterboxd review, I'm like, Marvel has officially earned their cinematic universe because you brought these crazy kooky space people with the Guardians together with, all the Earthbound Avengers, and bring them all together, and it was such this combination of epic proportions. It flowed so nice. I mean, it was like the fastest 2 hours and 20 minutes like I can remember in a movie. Um, yeah, Avengers Endgame, and then like the snap really kind of rattled everyone. I remember you had mentioned that they kind of messed up the snap, but it got me, and yeah, Avengers
No,
Endgame is my number
Infinity
three.
War.
Or I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Infinity War.
it's okay. We all have Endgame on the brain. It's fine.
There's so much going on these little posters I'm staring at.
That's fair. All right. So we
Number two.
progress to number two.
Yep.
All right. So my number two is all about the space pirates themselves, the Guardians of the Galaxy. Um, like for a movie that I mean, I knew nothing of the Guardians going into this movie. It was just, hey, it's the next Marvel movie. I watch all the Marvel movies. I'll go watch this movie. And I went to the Thursday night launch, 9 o'clock. There was like hardly anybody really in the theater, especially now. Like you're looking at Endgame, where it's packed to the brim, and oh my god, I was just blown away at like the visuals, and then oh my god, the flippin' soundtrack to that movie.
Hmm.
Oh my, like just like every time I watch the movie, and I get a lot of people telling me that they like Guardians 2 more or just as much, and Guardians 2 even having Kurt frickin' Russell in and just didn't hold the same weight and magnitude to it. Um, that the first one had, and just you had you know the introduction of all the characters with Nebula and Gamora and Ronan, and so your bad guys slash good guys with Gamora, and then the actual Guardians themselves, and with Groot and Rocket and everybody, and Dave Batista, especially being a wrestling fan, and then as in wrestling, he was just this big, huge. He was the animal. He just destroyed everything, and then he comes in with all that dry humor, and it was just so hilarious. And it just knocked my socks off. Like it's just like I remember like going to Walmart at midnight and making people go in the back and get it to get it at midnight. There's another one I didn't get a steal of, but like I just remember being like, "You're gonna get me this movie like right now at midnight to have that on Blu-ray."
Awesome, awesome. Unfortunately, my it seems like a lot of your favorite Marvel movies are one that kind of got a little soured for me out of the gate. With Guardians, I didn't see it until it hit Blu-ray, and I remember like watching it one night, and I was kind of had a few drinks, and I kind of was dozing off, and it was just like, oh, that was fun, whatever. But it wasn't until I fell in love with my number two pick that I came back to Guardians, and I really appreciated a lot more of that love story between Gamora and Star Lord that shines so bright in the original. But man, Guardians 2 really won me over, which is my number two pick. What is geez, I forget his name now. What's the blue guy's name?
Oh, oh, Yanu, Mary Poppins, y'all.
Yeah, exactly. So Yanu's death in Guardians of the Galaxy 2 really got me. Like, you take this character that you like totally despise in the first one, and you warm up to him in the second one, and by the end of the second one, he's sacrificing himself and like making me cry. Is I think that's probably the most. I mean, other than Endgame, I think Guardians 2 is easily the Marvel film I got the most emotional about. It has some faults. I mean, Kurt Russell's is not the. I mean, he's an interesting bad guy being this planet thing, but not the greatest. The opening, oh my goodness, the opening with Baby Groot and the song as the Guardians are like getting their butts kicked in the background and Groot dancing in the foreground as Baby Groot, just completely adorable. Guardians 2, great ride. Had a blast watching with that with my son in the theater, and still have a real soft spot for it. That was the first book I ever bought in the store.
Oh, nice. I think the Guardians 2 was one of the first movies that that I got super soured from a ton of exposure to like overexposure from ads for it. And then also
I know.
just my movie going experience with it was there's a lot going on in my life. And as much as I enjoyed the movie, it just like the day that I watched it just wasn't a good day. And then unfortunately, I think just like rang through that I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to, unfortunately. But
Mm.
it was still one that was really good. That one did not make my top 10. I think it would have been like right outside of it. And I keep maintaining that I need to go back and watch it. But it was still a good and a good and fun movie. Um, so
Oh, and I love the Drax humor in it. I remember watching a lot of reviews going in. Everyone was like, "Oh, I can't stand this Drax humor. It's just so stupid or so over the top." And I was love it. Like sensitive nipples, I was bawling. I was really taking that in. I enjoyed it. All right, what is your number one pick?
my number one is The Winter Soldier.
Okay.
And it's been my number one for quite some time. I love spy style movies. So 007. I loved Alias when that was a TV show, and in this movie, uh, it changed the MCU. I mean, it changed the landmark of everything, really. And the people who have seen Endgame, they harken back to that when they go back to that specific time. It's a little bit before that, but they reference it some. Um,
Russo brothers.
yeah.
Yep.
So, um, and especially also if you watch Agents of Shield, I mean, like it completely changed that television show as well. But there's just
Yeah.
so much the fights between Bucky and Cap, and then you had Widow and Maria and everything. It was a superhero movie that it really didn't feel like it was necessarily a superhero movie per se. It was soldiers, throwing down, with some good tech and gear and what have you. Obviously Cap is super powered and what have you, so there is that. But it was just
Kind of like the Dark
yeah,
Knight in that respect.
and there was just so much espionage stuff in it, and it just like every time I watch it, which it's been a while since I've watched it now, it's just, I mean, there's so many Marvel movies that come out every year and, other things, but it's just,
Yeah.
man, every time I still haven't found something is when I finished watching it where I've went, that's my new number one. Like both Guardians and Ragnarok came close. Like Ragnarok and Guardians of the Galaxy, I could probably easily switch between two and three, but this Winter Soldier is still just the breadwinner.
Winter Soldier was one that I really fell in love with the second time around. Like the first one, I was like, this is kind of a fun, punch 'em up movie. I kind of had that experience as well with Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol, and Rogue Nation, where I was like, oh, these are fun enough action movies, whatever. But it wasn't until the second time around where, I mean, just like being able to feel Cap's punch on these guys as he's like ransacking the ship full of pirates or whatever, it just had a whole new umph to it that I really appreciated.
Oh yeah, GSP.
Okie dokie. So I have to give it to Endgame being my number one Marvel film. I'm just in awe of the fact that they paid off ev- so many of these movies within this climax. And I mean that'll lead us right into our, spoiler filled in-game discussion. But I mean just the fact that this mission accomplished easily. I mean, touchdown, they landed it. And it drives me nuts to hear people on the internet say that this movie's boring. I mean, and these are the same people that are like, "Oh, I love these character moments in these dramas," but like they for some reason they look at that differently when it's given to you in a superhero film. Doesn't make any sense to me at all. I think the slow character moments are great. They're accented with fantastic comedy. I mean, we'll probably get into it here in a minute, but the end of Endgame, like you'll go to like bookstores and see pictures of like the whole MCU, like all these characters like flying in here and here and there, and they put that on screen in a movie. Blew my mind.
Oh yeah, dude. I like when we start talking about it, like when I say I'm going to use air quotes, you can't see this. The air quotes, the bad things that I have to say about this movie, are you're going to laugh. So, but
All right, yeah, I saw Endgame Thursday night, 6 o'clock, first possible showing here in Charleston, Somerville area, and
I
yeah, it's great to see this movie with an audience of people who have been on this journey as well. I brought my sons, my nephews, and we had a great time.
yeah okay. Well, I saw it last night with my two roommates at 7. Like I would have loved to have went the first showing at Thursday, but I mean I had to work and just really wasn't any way around it. But so I'll start it off. I'll start it off with my couple of quote negative things that I have to say about this. So first off, it needed more Brie Larson. As I think every movie does, it needs more Brie
Yeah,
Larson. Um,
and the hate for Captain Marvel, it's just redonkulous. Like, okay, so I want to defend Captain Marvel for a second. Okay, so you have these people reviewing this movie saying, "Oh, she's so wooden. She has no character." She is
that was
like
a plot point.
she's this programmed soldier. Of course, she doesn't have any character. She's like supposed to be mechanic. That's exactly what they set up for her, and for some reason, people aren't understanding this
Did they
concept.
not? Did they get distracted by Jude Law and forget that he was talking, saying, "Hey, you have too many emotions," because that's what he did. Okay.
All right, sorry.
Uh, um, I was okay. So I knew that most, if not all, of the original Avengers were going to die because they had to. Besides, that's the culmination of it, but also like they make a lot of money and they just had to go. But the one that I was hoping would live, because even though she makes a lot of money for a female actress, and that's a different debate that we won't touch right now, but I was hoping that she would at least get her own independent movie before she left the MCU, and that was Scarlett Johansson. Um,
There's always a
so
prequel.
I mean, yeah, they could still do that, um, but the way that she died was fitting. So those are kind of my real, at least for now, two things: was not enough Brie Larson, and that ScarJo died. Um,
Yeah, that's the biggest point where I'm most conflicted about in game was Hawkeye and um, Black Widow going back and forth to sacrifice themselves for the Soul Stone, and I mean, it had me tearing up, but at the same time, I'm so torn
oh,
about whether I liked it or not. First of all, like this movie really puts Hawkeye front and center and basically says, "Hey, here's Hawkeye. Like him," and I'm just not buying it.
I mean, they actually do a really good job of, making him like a conflicted, like, do you really actually like him? Because they made him a murderer. I mean, yes, he was murdering bad guys, but I mean, they basically made him Batman and like Batman Begins. I mean, because
Yeah,
I mean, Hawkeye is Green Arrow, or Green Arrow as Hawkeye, whichever way you want to go about that. And Green Arrow is just Batman. So that's a different story. I guess the other thing I guess I will say that I didn't like is at the end that, they all took rocket fire at point blank range and like no one died at that point. I mean, to set up, I know that set up the big battle, but like no one
Yeah.
died in actual combat. And I have a problem with that. And that leads back into another thing that over the weekend that I had another problem with that we don't talk about on this cast, which is a TV show, but we won't go into that. We'll just go back to this. So, um, things that I
Game of Thrones.
oh yeah. We don't have enough time for that sidebar. Um, things that I really like. So, like I mentioned earlier, Rob Zombie Thor. What a
Yeah.
national freaking treasure! Holy God! And then as Guardians of the Galaxy, like literally, where do I sign up? To quote the closing credits of a movie that everyone knows I love. Where do I sign up? I'm ready. I want to get busy. I'm just give me that. I will pay money. I will fund it. Just let me go to that right now. 5 minutes ago, doesn't matter if he is in Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Just let's go. Um, Cap picking up Mjolnir, and then Thor's reaction. I knew it. That was priceless. And then Cap just wailing on Thanos.
Yeah, just that subtle hint in Ultron of, he could move it.
Which was he sandbagging? Was he not worthy yet? I think he was just sandbagging it to like because he just picked it up and it went crazy. But
Yeah, I wish there would have been more of like an ease it up kind of moment. They didn't give us that. He picked it right up, but
oh, he didn't even like he just called for it. It was like oh.
yeah, exactly.
um so that was I mean that was a really cool scene. Like the whole theater started clapping and went crazy. Um the other part that really really got me was really cool and I kind of expected it once you saw Strange look at Iron Man, but Iron Man rolls up and hits Thanos after he swats off Captain Marvel, because I did really going in this movie expect Captain Marvel to just body um Thanos and expected her really to be the one to do all of the damage. So I will say after I go through all of these highlights here, these are just kind of some high points.
Yeah.
Um, so he goes through I am inevitable. He snaps his fingers, nothing happens, and you see Iron Man has switched the gauntlets, and no, I'm Iron Man snaps it, and it just wraps up. Began with I am Iron Man. It ends with I am Iron Man, and like he gets an a quippy one liner
Yeah.
which is so perfect because he's Robert Downey Jr. and he's Iron Man, and then it also I mean again like we you put your 5 was Iron Man, that was my 10 would have been Iron Man, but it's that's what it began with and that's what it ends with is with Iron Man, and then it's just like it was so I know some people will say it was cheesy and maybe it was cheesy, but you know
Oh,
what,
no,
I
no.
got like 8 pounds of cheese in my refrigerator and that's not even that much of hyperbole. There's a ton of cheese in my refrigerator, give it to me.
Something interesting that was tossing in my mind today was I was just randomly I was dropping my son off at school, and I was like, what if they would have played the Ozzy Osbourne song there?
Oh yeah, no, they should have definitely played Sabbath right there. They totally should have played Iron Man.
I think that would have totally worked with Thanos' army fading into Ash or whatever and hearing dun, 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 dun.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was an
Oh yeah.
emotional moment, so maybe that's why they didn't go that rockin' approach. I don't know. I think it could have really elevated it somehow.
Yeah, and then Thanos sits down, and that you get that couple of seconds to think like, did they spare Thanos for some second, and then he sits down and he starts fading away too, and you're just like, oh man. And
Yeah,
then you got
totally an eye for an eye.
oh yeah, for sure. And you got the scene, and apparently there are people on the internet who don't like this scene, and I don't understand why. And I guess it's because they're insecure in themselves. Um,
Hmm.
but it's all the scene where all the women heroes shine and they just go through and they just kick ass. And
Oh, it
I'm
was
about that
brilliant.
life.
I liked when they did it in Infinity War. They kind of did a miniature version of it, and then they like amped it up to 11 in this one.
Oh yeah, like for sure, and it's just it's so good. There's so many strong women in this universe or the multiverse, and say they even bring in Pepper in too, and having her back in the suit, and Valkyrie showed up, and it was so good. I like oh man, it was like I was so amped up at like the by this point of the movie, and it was just you know it was just really good, and like people who are pissed off about that just if they're pissed off just for the sake of being pissed off, like then I think they need some check on their priorities.
Yeah, I don't really get the contention with the female characters. That doesn't make any sense. They're just as strong as the male characters, and not even talking with the feminist rights. I mean, it is what it is. They're on screen. They look beautiful, and they're kicking ass. I mean,
Right? This is
what more can
like
you ask for?
because we all knew like the ship starts firing into the air, and we are like, well, all right, well here comes Captain Marvel. Business has just picked up. Like we know, like she's coming in to body him, and like he went to go snap, and she's like, nah, G, like that
Mhm.
ain't happening. And
I keep hearing people say that Thanos. What's the purple stone? Is that the space or the power stone?
the
Do you
purple one,
know?
I think that's the Power Stone, but I'm not 100% sure.
For some reason, I thought it was the space stone, but I guess it's the power one makes sense because Thanos boxes her with it and she flies off. Which, yeah, a lot of people didn't like, her flying in. Um, like I got a chill whenever I saw kind of like this like flash in the clouds and I'm like, oh, there's Captain Marvel. She's gonna do her thing and she takes out Thanos' ship. I thought it was spot on.
Oh yeah, that was dope, dude.
And another big shout out, Scarlet Witch. Man, she showed up for this movie with her taking on Thanos one on one. I think she might be the most what's the term well in Little League whenever you award the most improved player, Scarlet Witch.
Well, I mean, she outside of Tony being the one that got the snap and killing everybody, like Scarlet Witch, like she's so nerfed in the MCU, from my understanding, is because like she's the one that she could have just you just boxed him up, squared him up, killed him, like no
Yeah,
questions asked. Like so she's nerfed down. But I mean, Elizabeth Olsen's a fantastic actress, and obviously, like we said, beautiful, and she can just like Scarlet Witch. Obviously with everything that happened in Infinity War, she should have been the one. If it, like I said, if it wasn't Tony and wrapping up that story arc, that was a conclusion of an 11-year story arc that was ended well. Battle of
yeah,
Winterfell. Sorry.
yeah. Mentioning Guardians 2 again, Nebula, like I mentioned that, I'm a big fan of Karen Gillian, and I was really impressed with how that she was used as being like this X factor where like her past self is tied to Thanos, but then her present self has learned. So I thought that was one of the more interesting story dynamics in this whole thing. The sea of fan service, and then you do have some pretty stimulating character pieces within all of that.
Oh yeah, that was really interesting because all the theories and speculation for the last year, because apparently one of I guess in how the comics that worked was that Nebula was the one who stole the gauntlet to give it back to the Avengers. So that was, and then it was they bring everybody back, and it was Marvel who did body him in the end. So it was very interesting to see that 10 minutes into the movie they roll up, they kill him, and it's the rest of the movie is scrambling, get everything back, with time travel, and then literally making fun of like every time traveling movie, especially the Back to the
Yeah,
Future franchise. Like,
yeah.
um,
So bringing it back to the start, like I was really happy with how they started it with Ben. Everyone's so pissed off, and then going right over to Thanos. And just for the last year, I've been so obsessed with that. You should have aimed for the head quote. And then right there at the beginning, Thor's like, "Yeah, I got you in the head, all right." So that was an excellent payoff there. And you're like, "What are they gonna do now? They killed the baddie." Um, And then like through the whole middle portion of the film, like I had a feeling they were going to do the time travel element, but and it was going to have something to do with Ant-Man, but the way they went about going and recollecting the stones, I had no idea. And I felt like I was on the edge of my seat seeing how that adventure would play out, and all like the callbacks. It was just so beautifully woven together. Cap versus Cap, America's ass, the whole nine
Oh,
yards. And what's this mean for Loki with getting away with the Tesseract in the middle of
oh
it?
yeah, I mean
Who
he got away
knows?
with the Tesseract, but then they undid that when they went back in time even further and took the Tesseract. Yeah, because remember, anything
Oh,
that
okay.
happened in the past now becomes the future. So they went back before he had the Tesseract and took the Tesseract. But
Uh, time travel logic head imploding.
right, it's crazy. Um, and then Tilda Swinton, like her like 5 minutes on
Yeah.
screen were great. Like like Hulk steps up and he's like, I'm looking for Stephen Strange. Oh, you're 5 years early. Well, I'm gonna need the time stone. No, I wasn't a question and I wasn't asking. You can just sit the hell down. And it was like,
Yeah.
all right, well, she just bodied the Hulk. Like, all right then. Um, yeah, like
Mhm.
the scene where you're talking about Cat versus Cat, and like that whole scene in the tower where they wove everything together, like that was really very well done. I was real happy with that. And then the scene with the multiple nebulas, and um that was, I guess, the other thing that I did have a slight issue with was, they each had enough of the juice for one round trip, but Nebula um gave hers to Thanos. Now, obviously, they have alien tech and they were able to recreate it, and that's how they time traveled themselves. But it's a 3 hour and 1 minute
Yeah.
movie. You couldn't spend 30 seconds to be like, here it is in the lab, we're making some more, or dude, the Magic Man going, I recreated this, but whatever. That's minuscule. Like again, it was they recreated it. It wasn't that big a deal. Um,
So two of the characters I wish would have gotten a little bit more screen time. Well, like so Hulk gets plenty of screen time being the whole like Banner Hulk, and that's a really fun new dynamic to watch. And I love the scene where they're rolling into New Asgard and he's in the back of the pickup truck and
that
the
was great. That was
pickup
just
truck is sparking as it goes along. That was hilarious. But him not really being, I mean, I guess it's understandable that he wasn't really involved in the final battle because he was kind of worn out from doing the original snap to bring everybody back. But gosh, I wish there would have been a Hulk out moment. It was like he's like, oh, I got it all figured out, but he really doesn't because he's not hulking out at all, and we need him to hulk out.
yeah. I mean, we've got plenty of bruisers though. I mean, Thor's the big bruiser now, and Cap, and then, well, I guess
Yeah.
not anymore, but um, I mean they're
Yeah.
both bruisers. So, and I mean they when they get to it, I mean Spider Man's a bruiser. He just hasn't figured that out yet. So, um,
I was kind I was kind of wondering how Spider-Man was swinging around that battlefield. What exactly is he swinging
a
off of?
debris in the air, or
Oh,
the the ship, or
whatever the case may be.
whatever, all the flying enemies, or oh yeah, the scene where they're just playing hot stuff. The whole scene of Hot Potato with the Infinity Gauntlet was aces.
Yeah, Black Panther having his moment, and um, Groot. Oh, why did they not? That there was like no Groot in this movie, which
I
was
mean, yeah, he was in
unfortunate.
it, but very little. And then not Dom, Vin
I mean,
Diesel. There we
even
go. That's his real name, Vin Diesel, or his stage name, whatever. Gets starring Vin Diesel. And I'm like, I don't remember him saying I am Groot like at all.
oh, I mean, even Drax got like a stabby moment, but Groot was like, "Hi, Rocket, how you been? Okay, moving on." I don't
Yeah,
know.
I have at least one more thing to say, and that's the all right. So Tony snaps, Tony dies, and we all saw, even though I tried to avoid him, we all saw the him recording the message for Pepper in the ads, but the message that he records in the actual Iron Man mask for his daughter. And when he says "I love you 3000," that was the one thing. Even though I didn't know it was a spoiler, I had seen on the internet. But oh my god, like I haven't really
Yeah.
been emotional in a movie, but that coming from this, really brash and arrogant man who, oh man, it just that got to me. Like that really did. I was sitting in the movie theater and I was like, oh shit, like what is this? And I just had to, I had to compose myself a little bit actually. Um, that was a hit. That was a heart hit on that one. I'm not even gonna lie.
I thought something I didn't even realize until I listened to a spoiler review this morning from Chris Stuckman, who's a really well-known movie reviewer on YouTube, was when they're panning the camera around the funeral, the boy that's standing there. Do you remember him?
Yeah, I was trying to figure out who the hell he was.
That's the kid that helps Tony in Iron Man 3.
Oh my god, it's been so long since I've seen that movie, but okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that didn't dawn on me at all. And then, um, yeah, that was there. And apparently in the comics, he turns into Iron Lad. So maybe we'll see where Marvel goes from here now. I mean, with so many of its fundamental characters, being out of the picture, it's an interesting transition.
Well, I mean,
It should be an exciting one. I'm really excited to see Far From Home and
oh yeah, the new Spider-Man looks really dope, and I was really hoping it was going to be Bucky would be the new Cap, but it's going to be. I mean, I'm okay with it being Falcon, but I mean, I just like Bucky a lot. I mean, obviously, my favorite movie being Winter Soldier, but
yeah.
um,
I'm curious how it's going to work with Falcon because he doesn't have the serum. So what exactly makes him like have Cap's
I
abilities?
guess it's his
I don't know.
virtue, and he's going to be the virtue and have the shield. So I guess he's
Okay.
going to be Falcon America. I don't know. Maybe we'll have a Falcon punch. We'll see.
Hopefully, we'll get a solo movie that really shines with him because he's a really fun character, especially in Civil War. I recall him really shining pretty bright.
Yeah. So that ought to be interesting going forward with I mean they've got the blonde redhead replacement for ScarJo and Elizabeth Olsen. Looks like they've got Cap's replacement. I'm sure Winter Soldier will be in there somewhere. They've got I guess Ant-Man's still around. I mean no reason for him not to be. They've got the Asgardians of the
Yeah.
Galaxy. But for the ones on Earth, they've still got a good crew, a good young crew to work with, and it will be interesting to see how they weld like Sophie Turner and Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy into the picture.
One thing I wish the movie had was as much of like a presence as Earth's heroes, the Avengers was. It would have been really awesome if they would have had like a Streets of New York, like Iron Man funeral procession, like drums and bagpipes, like making him into like, this world hero instead of just this real small scale, like we're, just mourning him as the Avengers kind of thing. Like it didn't really seem really confined to the team where, they saved the world. Why isn't the world celebrating?
And I think maybe, like old Tony, that would have been like a definite thing that he would have wanted this big grandiose,
Hmm.
grand scale, you know, you know, shout it from the top of the old Avengers Tower type deal. And now it's, he had gotten used to that small lifestyle away from everybody and type thing. And, Pepper definitely probably wanted something, more small and
Yeah.
maybe it was easier also not having to explain, hey, we brought it, the people who knew that everybody was gone and now everybody's back, they didn't have to explain it or something, or maybe they went over that, I don't, but yeah, maybe we don't have to explain everything, and just hide in the corner.
That's a pretty valid reason in terms of his character arc as a whole being more intimate at that point. So yeah, I gave it 5 stars. I mean, just simply them being able to land such a huge opus of a an epic superhero movie after 11 years. I mean, hats off to him.
Yeah, I gave it 4.5. Just I'm trying. I think just being a little stingier with the 5 stars. It was. I think I would have given it 4.75 if that was a thing we could do, but it was really really good.
Right on.
All right, Justin. So I feel like there's a thing here with Endgame that we definitely haven't talked about yet, and we need to talk about, and that is there are no mid or post credit scenes. And for a Marvel movie, that's a pretty big deal. At least I think so. It's been what 11 years and now what 23 movies, 22 movies, and this is essentially the swan song, and this is where they switch it up on us. Um, so in my theater, we got to the end, and I think when the Marvel Studios logo popped up, they just started playing like the radio essentially through the speakers. So we didn't hear, or at least I don't remember hearing the ting ting of the hammer on the metal that is played. So there is no teaser scene, but there is that. So they did do something, but there is no actual scene. So having since the movie's ended, read some different things about the movie and what have you. That ting ting is a throwback to Iron Man 1, which is very appropriate. So with where it all began is now where it all ends, which is what they did with the movie with Tony. And I'm a big fan of that. I really like it a lot actually. I still would have liked if they had put the song Iron Man in there, but maybe they didn't think there was a spot for that that big riff, or maybe there was some rights with licensing or something. But it was a good callback. I've read a couple of things on why they didn't do an actual post or mid credit scene. The two main ones seem to be that they didn't want to take away from the epic that we just watched and all the heaviness of everything with Tony and Cap and Widow by trying to tease what was upcoming in either Spider-Man or the next phase. But some of the best scenes in some of those weren't even teasers or Easter eggs for upcoming movies. Like my favorite one was in Avengers 1, and they're just sitting there after the big battle and eating shawarma, and there was no real anything to it. It was just a quick funny scene. And I mean, I don't think they could necessarily done anything maybe funny. There wasn't the kind of spot for that in this movie, but they could maybe done maybe something. Or maybe they didn't think that they could, and that's why. But I feel like it's almost quasi blasphemous not to have a post credit scene at this point. I mean, it's what you do. You sit there in a Marvel movie and you wait for the scene, to be there. So, and then the other thing that I read was in conjunction with that was that with Spider-Man Around the Corner, that with it literally taking place right after the end of Endgame, and it being the end of this phase and being the segue and setting up the next phase, that those post-credit scenes are going to set up the next phase. So they didn't want to really give anything away there. They want Spider-Man to be that vehicle, which those two things make sense. I still just feel like they could have done something with it, but I do like the callback with the ting ting, especially with the movie that's full of callbacks. That's part of the reason I enjoyed the movie so much, is I am a man who enjoys his callbacks. What do you think, Justin?
Thanks, Joey. Yeah, those are all really good points. But personally, I thought it was kind of a slap in the face to us as Marvel fans. Like at the end of each of their movies, you always feel rewarded by sitting through all the credits and seeing what that last little bit is, whether it's a tease ahead or just a funny bit, just being rewarded for sitting there and knowing that, something's going to come at the end. It may be great, it may be just a funny send off, but it's something. And the ting ting, it was so subtle that I didn't even notice it. So, like, I didn't feel rewarded at all. I felt stupid for sitting there through all of that and getting what felt like nothing at the time. Now, I can kind of understand that this was the end of this chapter for them, and they wanted to just close it off by leaving it like that. And ting ting, that was the, call up from Iron Man. But for me, it personally didn't work. I wish they would have had something there. Maybe some kind of tribute shot or anything. It was just too subtle for it to really feel rewarding for sitting there the whole time, and it just didn't work for me. Moving on to our next segment, do you have a pick a flick for me?
Yeah, we're gonna transition a little bit. Not a huge transition, but a little bit. We're gonna stay in the same realm. Let's have you tell us about Shazam.
Oh my goodness, Shazam. Okay, so Shazam. Wow, I wrote into a podcast today of kind of complaining about this. Hats off to the Criterion Creeps podcast that I write into each week. Shazam. Okay, so I was really excited to see this movie. I was like, okay, this is going to be a fun, funny comic book movie. And so personally, for me, I'm not um, like I enjoyed Batman versus Superman. Justice League was all right. There's some good action. It wasn't perfect, but I had a good enough time. Man of Steel, I thought was a blast. So I didn't have any issues with the dark and broody DCEU. I don't. I mean, people are all into the fact that these superhero movies are taking themselves so seriously. There's not enough character in them. They need to be fun. That's what superhero movies are about. And I disagree with that. I mean, I enjoy a fun movie as much as the next guy, but so I didn't need this movie to go completely in the opposite direction, which is what it did. Um, but I still had fun with it. I liked all the. Have you seen it?
No, I have not. Because remember, it was one of the movies that was on my I'm apprehensive about list. Or
Oh, right, right. And
yeah,
I was excited for it. And I was surprised that you had said that. Okay, so the thing that got me about Shazam is the fact that it's fun. The opening with this premise where this kid becomes a superhero. He's like, "Woohoo! I'm a superhero, and I got to figure out my powers." Number one, they never really establish everything he can do because he's essentially just Superman, just the goofy version. A goofy version of Superman is what you figure out by the end, pretty much. And by the midpoint of this movie, I was thinking to myself, and it's never good when I start thinking to myself in the middle of a movie, why am I not enjoying this more? And it was because of this premise of, hey, look, I'm a superhero. Blah, look at me, I'm a superhero. And it just got so obnoxious in my mind. Like, and what was even more obnoxious to me is I came home and I start listening to all these reviews, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is so wonderful! It feels like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. It's such a joy. It's so fun. It's so wonderful. There's so much character." And I mean, it's just a cute superhero movie, and it's kind of small scale in terms of like the stakes. And I mean, it was all right. I think it's really overrated. Oh, oh man, was not expecting to talk about this, but that's the whole premise of.
I wanted to keep a theme, and this seemed very on theme.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be vulgar, but there's a lot of critics just totally sucking Shazam's dick. and I just don't get what the big deal is. I mean, yes,
You're it's not just critics. A bunch of my friends went and saw it and just raved about how good this movie was, and I wanted to see your take on it. So that's also part of the reason I picked it.
there's some interesting elements. Like some of the bad guys are like kind of like Ghostbuster, like gargoyle demon dogs. So that was kind of fun. So there's kind of a dark element where they're starting to rip people apart at one point. But the CGI on them is not great. But none of these critics are saying anything about it. Where in any other movie they would. It's like, oh, we're going to complain about the dark and broody DCU. We hate that. We hate that. Oh, they gave us the opposite. Guess we have to say we like it now? Is the impression I'm getting. It's like they're doing like a total 180, and I mean, it's fine. It's not a bad
It's
movie. It's
it's just not
just,
great either. I got you.
it's way too full of itself. So there is and I don't want to spoil it for you. There is a really fun twist at the end in terms of it kind of opens up a plot hole of what this power. I mean, it's so wide open about what this power actually even is. But I don't want to spoil that moment for you because it's one of the highlight. I thought it was one of the highlights. So Shazam, I gave it 3 stars. It's fun, but to me, the superhero premise, because I mean, we've been down this. I mean, so many people have said that like they're getting superhero fatigue, and I got superhero fatigue with Shazam because it was like superhero, 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 and I'm like, okay, I get it. Can we get on with an actual story here? So,
Yeah, like I don't even know I, if this is one I'm definitely gonna I'll watch at some point. But seeing as I still haven't watched Justice League or Aquaman, and I definitely want to watch both of them more than I want to watch this. So
and Aquaman, that's a whole nother can of worms. Silly fun time, lots of action. You say you haven't seen Aquaman? You said
no, I mean I need to get watch Khal Drago be the god of the sea. So I mean, but that's a whole different thing.
yes, sir. All right, so moving right along into our challenge portion. Joey challenged me with a very fanboyish movie, to say the least.
I see what you did there, sir.
Yes, sir. Okay, so what did I think of Fanboys? Um, so you know me, I'm constantly watching these real challenging Criterion movies all the time, watching these 2 hour and 20-minute spectacles of these people just kind of looking around, pondering life. And then I turn on Fanboys, and you know, it's not a bad movie. I think I gave it 2.5 stars. Um, I enjoyed it, but I didn't love it, and I had a couple issues with it. Overall, I'm glad you had me watch it because it was totally off my radar. Okay, so once again, I think Fanboys kind of nails its premise a little bit too hard. Like I enjoy all the Star Wars fandom in it, and like it really was a callback. Whenever I think they're like in the garage and they're playing like Mario Kart 64, I'm like, ooh, I was totally there. Whenever Phantom Menace was about to come out, it's just the Star Wars reenactment stuff in it was just a little too silly and dumb for me. Um, Examples being like when they're running from the police. So to back it up a little bit, so the premise of this movie is episode one's going to come out, and it's this group of friends, and it's your typical story of we graduated high school. One guy goes off and has a career, and his other friends are kind of like laying low, being cool, and doing their own thing still, and are kind of stuck. Um,
Well, one of them owns a comic book shop, and the other ones work for him.
right. That's a good clarification. Which brings me to I'm not going to make you tell me his name. Okay. Thinking about Dan Fogler.
That's Hutch.
So, in my opinion, you either love Dan Fogler or he's the most obnoxious person in the world. and he was a little obnoxious in this. I've enjoyed him in other occasions. Like I used to watch this show called The Goldbergs a lot, and he appeared in that and was kind of the same kind of fanboy kind of persona. And he was kind of fun in this Disney movie, this stop motion thing called Mars Needs Moms, where he was also kind of the same character. He was a little much in this. Let me get back to my point of where they kind of over Star Wars it. So like the scene where they're running from the cops and they like need to activate the hyperdrive and just like Empire Strikes Back and it doesn't work and then they actually activate it and it shows the van like going into light speed. A little much. They crash into some billboard and it makes a Darth Vader head and they hear a little much. Um, they fall into the trash compactor at the Skywalker Ranch. A little much. I like the Star Wars fandom in it. It was just too much reenacting. I think kind of. I just thought it was a little much.
So, um,
Um,
I think as a complete opposite side is usually we are as we weren't on in game. This one we are a little bit. Now, to be fair, I saw this before the last four Star Wars movies came out. So before Force Awakens, before The Last Jedi, before Solo, and before Rogue One. Movies did not exist. So, um, the joke in this movie. So, like you said, is that it's that these kids are going on a trip to see the Phantom Menace. But of course, the joke is that we all know that the Phantom Menace is terrible, but this is still with all of the hope and oh my god, it's a new Star Wars movie. Um, I
and I'm kind of on the other side of that a little bit to where I see that this Phantom Menace has faults, but I don't think it's like it, I don't think it ruined Star Wars like a lot of people do. So let me throw that perspective in there.
I mean, I I definitely think Attack of the Clones probably did
Hmm.
that a lot more than Phantom Menace, but that's neither here nor there. But that's the joke that
Right.
Phantom Menace is terrible, and if the internet rumors are true that not Boba Fett, Jesus, hold up, I can't think of the annoying character that everybody hates. Yeah, Jar Jar. That if Jar Jar Binks was really supposed to be a Sith Lord, if they had followed through with that, if that actually had happened, that's a completely different sidebar. But so so when you're recapping that story of them being trapped by the cops and hitting the hyperspace and the Darth Vader, like I'm over here dying. Like I thought that was hilarious. Like the whole thing, like when they went off course and went into enemy territory and went and found the Trekkies, like and they find Seth Rogen
Right.
the first time they find Seth Rogen as one of his first character, hilarious. Then they found Seth Rogen as he's a pimp. That was great. And then those two characters, and he's got
A
the
redneck
different
thing.
Star Wars tattoos, and like, oh yeah, the dark side of the force, and yeah, this the Jar Jar Binks. He's gonna be awesome. Yeah, like that's just the whole thing is great. Now the movie like it's not any sort of anywhere close to a cinematic masterpiece, but it was hilarious. I didn't rewatch it for this. I
Okay.
watched it a few months ago, um um and I had thought about rewatching it to actually write a review, and then I was like, I've seen this movie probably almost 10 times. I again, it's one of those things, like I know it's not winning any awards, and maybe they do oversaturate it with some, but I mean the cameos alone, especially the two big Star Wars cameos, are great. Then they have a Kevin Smith, they have a Jay and Silent Bob cameo.
I really enjoyed Kevin Smith making an appearance.
Yeah, and it's definitely, you can tell it was around the time of Clerks 2 because it also had the sexy stud.
Too bad Mark Hamill wasn't in it.
Oh, right. I mean, I guess his one in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back was enough.
Okay.
Um, uh, I mean, I guess they could have had him be the cock knocker again. That'd have been really good. Danny McBride was good in his part. Shooter McGavin was great. I don't know his real name. I never do. He's Shooter McGavin. Always has been. Always will be.
Yeah,
You know,
that was one hell of a spray tan there.
oh my god, it was so atrocious. Danny Trejo, uh, the chief talks
Yeah,
in third person because it confuses the bitches. Like, don't you dare say a bad word about Menudo. Um, like, there's just
it definitely had the feel of those comedies that were coming out during that time, like Euro Trip and Road Trip with Tom Green, just with the Star Wars spin for sure.
oh yeah, it just there was some really good stuff, and then they do hit you with the feels with the just letting Linus watch the movie,
Hmm.
um, and then
That's an interesting point because so they bring up the whole Lightus thing at the beginning, and they don't really mention it
I mean he does have
again.
to go to the
Um,
hospital, and Carrie Fisher is the nurse, and they hit you with the I,
well, I thought I mean, okay, so I lost track of the fact that he was dying, and the reason the to justify, what you just said was the fact that he did fall out of the van, so that put him in the hospital.
oh yeah, he did. It put him in the hospital, and but basically he's just ignoring it. I
Right.
mean, clearly as like you need to go back home, and he's like, "Nah, I'm doing this. This is I'm gonna die anyway, so this is kind of my swan song." But
Mm,
because they have this scene where he's like, "Oh, he's only got like 6 months to live," and he didn't want to. He wasn't even gonna tell. Um, oh Jesus, Eric. He was like, "Nah," he didn't want to tell him, because they had been at odds or whatever, and so he was just it was his last hurrah. He didn't really care. Screw it. I'm out. And
mhm.
so
I had totally lost track of that, and it wasn't until after the movie when I was listening to some other people talk about it, and they're like, "Oh, it was touching, how he's the one guy who got to watch the movie." And I was like, "Oh yeah, he was dying of cancer." I don't know how I lost track of that. Maybe that would have hit me a little harder if I would have stayed on track of that. I don't know. Probably my own fault, but
I mean, maybe again, like this is definitely something, especially having watched it almost 10, 11 years ago or so when I was much younger. Um, and maybe then it would have, maybe you would have stayed on top of it as you're, definitely more of the arty guy. And that isn't a shot at you or anything. It's just, a statement of fact. But I wanted to get you out of your wheelhouse a little bit as you
yeah.
like to get me out of mine.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. So yeah, I had fun with it. I wish there would have been a payoff for the one guy who's working with his dad at the car dealership, deciding not to. Um, I mean, they pay it off at the end with like seeing how he's like going to be like a comic book artist, but like
I was about to say there totally was.
just like okay, I get that, but like it seemed like what are they, the Grand Canyon at that moment, and he's like, "Oh, I have to either go home or continue on," and then they just continue on. It didn't seem like there was ever like that decision moment. I don't know.
Yeah, he just decided to be an artist again, and then they kind of wrapped everybody up because then Hutch finally got his detailing, and then Windows finally got the girl, which is K Bell, and
I thought she was excellent. She was like the perfect cool fangirl in the
oh
movie.
yeah, and then she's Slave Leia, like oh man, and we've discussed before how much I love K Bell, so of course. Um, And then I think maybe I mean my favorite part in the middle of the movie, well, I guess the two parts is the part where she's like he's in love and he won't even look at the sweater yams, and then the other part is the where the two Trekkies come in and he's like we don't hawk the Trek. But my I think the last line of the movie, the literal last line, is they're sitting there and they're all being raucous and they got the beers and everything in the theater and they're just like, what if it's bad? And then the movie cuts to black and it's like, well, well, got him.
Did you not like Phantom Menace when it first came out?
I mean, I saw it a little while later. I think it's the Star Wars movie I have actually seen the least. But I mean, I was pretty young. I mean,
I mean, it still has one of the best lightsaber fights in like.
Oh, yeah, and I think when I tell people, like, if for storyline and whatnot, you just watch the lightsaber battles, but,
Mhm.
like, I had to watch Attack of the Clones, and I've seen it. I mean, it came out literally on my 17th birthday, so I I had no way to, like, not watch that, and then, I mean, Revenge of the Sith came out, I think 3 days I think it was 3 days after my 20th birthday, I wanna say it was. 19th or 20th birthday. So, I mean, they all came out around a birthday. So I guess the other one was like my 14th birthday. And then I was getting into Star Wars at that point, and I think I had already seen the original trilogy, but I don't think I had any way to see Phantom Menace. Like I didn't have the means to go to Phantom Menace on my own, and like
Okay.
so
Yeah, we were a little young yet. I think seventh, eighth grade was kind of yeah.
yeah.
Final thoughts. So I really did like how Seth Rogen kind of got lost in that first character, that Trekkie character, because you don't really notice him at first, and then he's like, oh wow. So you know, Seth Rogen enjoyed that. Like I don't like I enjoy Star Trek too. So like the feud between the two fandoms, I don't know. It gets I don't know. It gets lost on me somehow.
Well, you know that there is like there is an actual feud between the fandoms, right? Like that's a thing. Maybe it's exaggerated some in this
Hmm.
movie, but like for me personally, like I remember being young and like living in Bishopville, and like we didn't have cable,
Okay.
and like all we had was TV, like just what we could get on air. And one of the things we watched was Star Trek: The Next Generation. And as much as I loved Riker and Picard and Data and all of them,
Hmm.
as soon as I saw the first Star Wars movie, there was no more Star Trek. Screw Trek. It's all about the wars, and it wasn't. I mean, so like that kind of hit to me. It was like, oh, it's one or the other type thing.
Like
Um,
for me personally, like my dad had the VHSs of all the Star Trek movies, so I watched those growing up. He and I actually had to discover Star Wars on my own. This is a whole nother conversation. So I don't know. I liked all the movies for the most part, so I didn't really feel that feud. And and oddly, I like Spaceballs. I didn't really think was funny for some reason. I guess my Star Wars fandom I take more seriously to
I mean,
where I'm not into the
I,
parody as much.
I mean, I'm not a huge Spaceballs person either. Like if you're talking about Nick, your and it's been a long, long time since I've seen it, so maybe I need to revisit. But like everyone, like you had people over and they were trying to talk Mel Brooks, and they were like, "Ooh, Spaceballs" or "Blazing Saddles" or other movies, and I'm just like I really didn't really like either one of those movies, and it's been a super long time since I watched them because I didn't really enjoy them. So
All right, so thanks for having me watch Fanboys. It was a good time. No alcohol required. Well, a few drops wouldn't hurt.
I hear you.
All right, so I'm going to challenge you back, and I'm going to finally do it. The movie that this segment was invented for, you have to watch Lahane.
Say what?
Lahane is a 1995 French movie, and I don't want to say anything about it
Uh,
because I didn't know anything about it, and it rocked my world. Gave it 5 stars right off the bat, and it's not too artsy. It is very aggressive, I would say. Um, yeah, I might have, you know, hinted a little
I
bit too much with Persona was saying the connection to Fight Club. So I'm not going to do that with Lahane. It's in the Criterion Collection.
Okay, so I was just looking through my watch list. You had told me about this movie before, and it is in my very large watch list to watch. So I'm pretty excited for this. It's a good pick.
Moving right along, we'll start wrapping this show up. As always, as we're wrapping it up, we'll say something good we watched recently and something we have coming up. So knowing me, I I got involved. I got myself involved in yet another movie club. So in addition to watching a couple movies a couple times a month, based on us interacting, I also have a friend on Letterboxd named Adam Davey, who I'm doing the same thing with. and we encouraged each other to watch the Police Story 1, 2, 3. So Police Story 1, 2, which are about to come out on Criterion. They might are that they're pretty recent Criterion releases, and then Super Cop, which was a Criterion Laserdisc. So I had a lot of fun experiencing some of the early Jackie Chan. If you're gonna watch one of the, have you seen any of the Police Story movies?
I'm never even heard of them, to be honest. Actually,
Okay. Um, if you're gonna watch one, it needs to be one. One has charisma out the yin yang karate reference yin yang.
yeah.
Um, the stunts are crazy fun, crazy unexpected. The comedy is so goofy and over the top. It works perfectly. Two is they lost all the charisma, and then three is a pretty solid action movie with enhanced production value. So, yep, just got through with the Police Story 1, 2, and 3. Pretty interesting watches, and then up next for that little movie club of me and Adams, he's like, "All right, so what do you want to watch next?" And I was like, "Oh, let's do an epic." And so he gave me a few choices, and I decided to go with. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be watching War and Peace from 1966, which is an 8-hour Russian film.
Oh, all right then.
I'm going to probably watch it in a couple chunks. That's what I did with Showa, which was the 9.5 hour documentary. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to it. There was many a times in high school where I wanted to read the War and Peace book, but just cracking that is a challenge. So hopefully by the time we talk again, I'll be able to talk about that 8-hour Russian epic, War and Peace from Leo Tolstoy. So, what have you watched recently? What are you watching next?
I got a few actually pretty good. All the last ones I've watched have been pretty good. But I think the one I'm going to talk about is a movie from 2005 called Brick.
Okay.
I don't know, familiar with it. I did not know when I picked it that it was a Rian Johnson movie or Ryan Johnson, however he pronounces his name. I think Ryan. Um,
Yeah. Right.
so picked the movie late at night, thinking it was just some high school movie about drugs, and I mean, I guess technically it is a high school movie about drugs. Um, but it's like not. It's a noir movie. So you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who is trying to find his missing girlfriend, who isn't really missing because in the very first scene he's standing over her dead body, who in like a ravine. It's not even a ravine. It's a I can't think. It's a an aqueduct. Yeah, an aqueduct. I think. And then the rest of the movies he's trying to find her, and then there's like there's these drugs people he's trying to infiltrate to try to figure out what's going on with them, and then there's a missing brick of like cocaine and or heroin, and it's just this really really good whodunit movie, and he just plays the part so well. And like just over the years I've just gotten to where I like Joseph Gordon-Levitt more and more and more. Like he's come such a long way from 10 Things I Hate About You, which I mean I also really liked, but also neither here or there. Um so yeah, like if you haven't seen that one, I think that's one. It's on Netflix, so it's real easy to watch. And yeah, so I really enjoyed that one. Up next, I don't really have anything specific. I think like we've been trying to do this all year. We're gonna try to do Yojimbo into the Man with No Name trilogy, and we're gonna try to get back to our super bad movie list. And I think the next one is probably gonna be like Birdemic, um, because we watched
Oh,
like
okay.
three in January, and the goal was like one a month to get them all out in the year, and so we've kind of taken a break from that. I think that's the
Okay.
plan.
Oh, very cool. Hi. Well, that was a fast 2 hours.
Yeah, I know, right? And I gotta freaking get to work in the morning. I also might want to pick the main movie for next week.
Yes, we do have that. No, I wasn't ending it. I was just all right. So that brings us to what's next for the average Joes. What are we watching for next time, Joey?
All right, so I'm gonna try not to butcher this, but this is by a director that you like a lot and a director that I have seen. I think at this point 3 of his movies, and I've enjoyed him a lot, and it's one I want to see more of. So this is Dode's Kadin.
Oh, Dedeskadin?
Okay, Deduskadin. All right, so I did butcher that pretty badly. Um, by Akira Kurosawa. Um, so I know that you are very familiar with him. I am very familiar with him. I know my roommate who watches all of these movies with me is going to be pretty stoked.
I'm pretty sure this is his first color movie, and all I know about this is it's about a kid in a rural town who like mimics a train noise by saying Dedeskadin, like a choo choo kind of thing.
Okay,
That's all I know about it, but it's Kurosawa, so
yeah, and this looks
should
like
be
it's
an.
going to be a little bit different because I mean I think the 3 that I've seen have all been samurai movies.
Mhm.
So being Hidden Fortress, Seven Samurai, and Throne of Blood. So this is going to be a different a different take. Um,
Yeah, I should have challenged you to watch Ran, and we could have had a Kurosawa-thon
oh yes.
next time.
So but yeah, I know I've had this one picked out. I'm pretty stoked for it. I wish I wouldn't have butchered it, but hey, that's neither here nor there. I'm pretty stoked.
All right, that's been the Average Joe's Movie Club Cast, episode 5. Thanks so much for listening. Make sure to check us out on Letterboxd. Our account information is in the description, and you can check out all our daily thoughts on movies as we watch them.
All right, and if you guys ever have any questions for the show, feel free to please send us an email at the Average Joe's Movie Clubcast at gmail.com.
All right, I hope everyone has a great night. Happy movie watching. Cheers, everyone.
All right, everyone, y'all have a good night. Thank you so much. Goodbye.